Director of Guitar Studies for Northern Arizona University, author and composer Philip Hemmo. I'm here today with an expert panel to discuss a fundamental concept that affects every guitarist at every level. How do we utilize our practice time to achieve the most production and thus reach our goals? The question is one that struck me a few years ago. I was designing a lecture for a group of high school students, talking about how to get the most out of their practice regimens. And in doing the research for my presentation, I started to realize that many of the choices that we make are unconscious choices about how we design our practice. We learn a lot from modeling, and in our private lessons, many times what we're shown is things by priority. So we aren't able to really organize our practice to a way that leads to the greatest benefit. So I started digging a little deeper, and I felt that the easiest source to research was how do athletes design their practice regimens? And the results were very interesting. In sports, the idea of structured practice is key. Athletes may subtly alter routines based on need, but the structure remains the same. They also differentiate between what goes on in a practice and what goes on in a game situation. You never hear athletes talking about the score of a practice. And that's something that we can adopt, that our practice is really to help us to get to the end goal. As University of San Francisco professor Dr. Jim Taylor states, routines enable athletes to be completely physically, technically, tactily, and mentally ready to perform their best. I don't know a world-class athlete in any sport who does not use routines in some part of his or her competitive preparation. There was an article also in Men's Health magazine where there was an interview with Mike Mancias, who is one of LeBron James's trainers. He breaks down his practice routine. He states that his practice routine includes preparation, warm-ups, strength training, and recovery. So how do we take this structure and these routines and apply them to our practice, no matter what our goals are and what level we are in our study? I suggest that students organize practice time into blocks similar to those discussed. Each block serves a specific purpose. Within each block, we can focus on the macro concepts, the large concepts, or the micro concepts, the small specific ideas that we need to work through. Block 1 is warm-up and technique. This block should consist of both physical and technical warm-ups. Physical exercises can be with or without the guitar. Technique exercises can be custom tailored to a student or performer's needs, but should always develop both big and small muscle motions, as well as critical self-listening. I always recommend to students that they start slowly in whatever exercise they're working on. At slow speeds, practice perfection, beauty, and elegance in tone, and carry that over as technique develops. Block 2, new repertoire. Once you're warmed up, I suggest focusing on new repertoire. Focus on difficult passages first. Always practice what you can't do, not what you can. I also suggest dedicating a large percentage of your overall practice time to the development of new repertoire. If we practice while we're mentally fresh and focused, we'll get the most out of each practice session. And you can chart progress and goals to see where you were a week ago or a month ago in the progress of a new work. Block 3 is maintenance of old repertoire. All of us who are preparing concerts know the importance of this block. The maintenance of large amounts of repertoire will take structured practice. I always suggest focusing on the weak areas in your repertoire rather than trying to run through everything. If time permits, you can focus on large chunks of music, playing multiple movements of a large movement piece, or if time does permit, run your entire concert to prepare for the experience of playing through a concert. Block 4, cool down. This block could be used for slow practice of trouble spots, critical listening, sight reading, or any other activity which allow the player to wind down the practice and set goals for what you want to achieve the following day. I also like to use this time to reflect on how well I achieved today's goals, whether there were areas that I need to allocate more time to the following day, and to assess overall progress, especially with technique and again with difficult passages. Thank you again for attending this lecture. I'm grateful to be part of this panel, and my colleagues will offer specific strategies that will build on some of the things I've talked about. They may offer personal insights that will kind of narrow focus in how to practice. We're grateful to be here, and we hope you find this useful. We'll see you during the question and answers.
Prepping our body for practice and performance before engaging with the guitar is essential to avoiding injury. This should be a regular prelude to physically engaging with the guitar and can include well-known practices such as yoga and Tai Chi. But for our purposes, we're going to focus on those things directly related to guitar practice and performance. So I want to emphasize that all stretching and warm-ups should be done within the median range of motion. That is to never extend tendons and muscles to the extreme of the range. We want to warm the tissues, not to overstress them. So in all movements, stay within the median range. We'll start with large muscle groups, medium and small, ending with the hands, because starting with the large muscle groups, we can burn off those stress-inducing hormones, the excess of those, that usually create the fight or flight. So we can help with our mind by working with our body here. We're going to begin with the corner stretch. It involves nothing more than our own body weight and gravity and stays within the median range of motion. The hardest part about this is finding an empty corner. Restroom stalls work great, backstage corners also. So first, stand about a foot away from the walls, keep the elbows level with the shoulder, and place the entire forearm against the wall. Now lean into it. Keep your spine straight. Hold for 10 counts. You'll feel a nice stretch in the pectoral muscles. Don't do this with just your hands on the wall like a push-up. The idea is to stretch the pectoral muscles. So be sure your entire forearm makes contact with the wall. Really lean into it and keep your feet flat on the floor. The next are hold-ups. We call this because it looks like you're being held up in a robbery. You start with lying on the floor, face down, put a pillow under your chest so you can rest your forehead on the floor to avoid neck strain. Keep your elbows in line with your shoulder, palms face down, elbows bent at a right angle. Lift your arms in one unit, keeping everything in the same place as it was on the floor. Slowly pull your shoulder blades together. Pause, release to the floor, and repeat. Next for us are the second stage of this. And it's the same thing, except now we're going to pull our shoulder blades down by pulling our right-angled arm units down. Again, slowly release to the floor and repeat. The next category involves the arms. And so we start with a flexed forearm stretch. Okay, and it's just flexing the hand. And we use our opposite hand just to support this. Make sure to keep the shoulders in line. Don't raise the shoulders. Press to a count of 10 and do the same with both sides. Next, we do a little bit more stretching with that same idea. Make a fist. Again, hold, gently supporting that hand with the opposite hand. Then we do dorsiflexed forearm stretch. That means dorsiflexion is this position. So we're opening up that area, the muscles here where the carpal tunnel area is. We're opening that by, again, gently using the opposite hand. Don't press from the tips. Instead, support the knuckle joints. Do the same thing with fingers up. Again, not at the tips, but just supporting gently at the knuckle joints. Always both sides. We end up with the hands now, tendon glides. And so now we start with this position. I tend to do them both at the same time. It's easy. This is very gentle. Fingertips to the palm, keeping the thumb straight. Then we make a fist, and then we make a hook. You're going to hold them a little longer than I'm doing right here. And you can hold them as long as you like. They're really gentle exercises. If you find you don't have a situation where you don't have time to do all those exercises, at least do the tendon glides, the last group, in the hands, fingers, wrist, as above. They're great for people recovering from repetitive strain injury, a gentle way to exercise the tendons and their attached muscles. So stay healthy. Well, off the guitar, gentle warm-ups. I wish you a long, injury-free, healthy life with the guitar. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hilary Field, and I am a classical guitarist and teacher in Seattle, Washington. Here's my tip for successful practicing. Practice slowly. Slow practice will help you achieve your goals and play well at any tempo. When you practice slowly, you can hear the music more clearly, and you will be more intentional with your technique. If there is a difficult transition, slow it down until you can play it in time, even if it ends up being half speed or less. That way, you won't practice any gaps. Once the transition is smooth, play it gradually faster. This works well with the metronome by moving the speed up in small increments. Slow practice gives you time to work out your musical ideas and fix any errors, because they will be more obvious at that tempo. Good luck with your guitar studies and your home practice, and enjoy the music.
We are talking about practice habits, and I want to focus on practice habits for performers. And this may be different to practice habits for beginners because the practice habits depend on the level and the goals of the performer, of the musician. The beginners need to create a structure that may allow them play the instrument in the future, and they need to improve the technique, the understanding of the music, and the structure of the pieces they are playing. But when we are talking about the preparation for a public performance, this can be different. And the preparation for a public performance may be enhanced by the musicians when they focus on deliberate practice. And this term is very important. Deliberate practice is a system that has a purpose. This will be the structure on which we will base our practice sessions. We can create two different groups, and the first one is the physical preparation, and the second one is the mental preparation. The physical preparation can just happen after we have some extra information. I mean, we can just start working on improving our movements or our technique after we read the score, after we read the notes, after we know which are the movements we are required to do, or after we analyze the form of the piece we have to perform. Part of the physical preparation is the repetition. And repetition is something that can be positive or negative. And repetition can be something bad because it can be just something that we create automatically without thinking. Repetition can be positive when we have different approaches for the same passage, and we repeat the passage in different ways. We can repeat a passage based on producing a better sound, or just repeating a passage trying to solve a technical problem, but never just mindless repetition. Part of the physical preparation is having different options to solve the same problem. And that can be translated to finding more than one fingering for the same passage. By doing this, we will also avoid the mindless repetition because we will be focusing our attention on new elements or new movements. And the second part is the mental preparation. And one of the most important things for mental preparation is motivation. And we can find motivation in external factors such as teachers or colleagues or musicians we admire. And this can be very positive because when looking around, we are forgetting about looking to ourselves, and we can receive external motivation that can help us develop other skills and other ideas. A very important second thing about mental preparation is to be able to break a bad cycle. And a bad cycle means a bad attitude, a loss of motivation, or loss of passion. And we have to be able to self-regulate and to self-analyze our work and be objective with our goals and be objective with our mistakes and put everything in a context that can be translated to another person and forget that we are talking about ourselves. And to finish, I want to highlight the importance of creating a routine. And it's very difficult when we are trying to organize it by ourselves. So I like to share with you a list of points that we can write down and follow every time we are starting our practice session. This list may include to create a schedule, to set short and long-term goals, to create a warm-up routine, to set priorities for each day, and to be able to play through all the pieces we have worked. To create practice habits, it's very, very important to create first a structure that will allow us invest our time and our effort in a successful way.
Hello, I'm Larget-Caplan, and I'm talking to you today about practice. While having regular instruction, I found organizing my practice to be quite easy. One, my instructor and I would discuss what needed to be done for the next lesson. Two, the concerts and gigs I had were big deals and often scheduled with quite a bit of space between them, so I could easily focus on what needed to be done and prepare accordingly. And three, my life outside of music was not very complicated or so demanding that I couldn't keep track of what needed to be done. The last one was very short-lived. Of course, when I stopped receiving instruction and I was floating in a world that valued my work quite differently than the conservatory, and without someone encouraging me in a particular direction, I had to learn how to learn and what was the best way for me to do that. As my career expanded with multiple programs at one time, performance and recording projects, teaching and arranging, and now recording, keeping track of what I needed to do and what I did for both professional reasons and my own mental health became more and more important. I found I spent so much time and energy trying to remember what I needed to be doing that I was wasting time. And I would wake up in the middle of the night recalling a piece that I had forgotten to work on. It was not nice. It was quite stressful. I spoke with quite a few musicians about this, and each of them had their own way of dealing with it. Some used journaling, some planned their practice 6 months ahead of time on a calendar. Others allocated a particular amount of time for practice and techniques and pieces. I heard that Taraga would practice an hour of arpeggios, an hour of scales, an hour of chords, and an hour of tremolo. True or not, it's an interesting idea. Journaling never quite worked for me. Neither did committing to a particular calendar or setting a timer. The idea of a coach or an assistant watching over me was outside my tax bracket, so a few years ago I decided to make a practice calendar. It had to be on paper and it required me to write down my doings. It has varied quite a bit as my goals and career requirements have changed, but the essence remains the same. Remove unneeded stress and acknowledge the work that I've done, because sometimes progress hides itself. So this is my calendar. Along the left side, you'll see composers and pieces. Along the top, you'll see dates in the month. Each week is broken down with a bold date signifying the start. I do include practice time, as well as French and other aspects that I'm working on. This is a completed practice calendar from just a few weeks ago. Along the top, you'll see time, which I break down to half-hour segments. Each week includes a number with a circle for the total amount of hours practiced. And under that, you'll see checks as well as initials for pieces that I practiced. The X's, found at the date of the 3rd, are for recording, pieces I recorded that day. I do this similarly for concerts as well as with meetings with composers. On the left side, about halfway up, you'll see Rec, Edit, R. That means recording, editing, and arranging. I have started to include that in my practice because it is such an integral part of my daily musical life. This is a student practice sheet that I gave just a few months ago. It includes practice time, stretches, warm-ups for right hand, warm-ups for left hand, and any other exercises we'd like to add. There are also a spot for pieces, and at the bottom I do include listening because it is such an important part of our musical life, both for albums and concerts. I did not include breaks on my sheet or that of my student, but we discussed this quite a bit, and it is an integral part of practice. So don't subtract the time you're not on the guitar. I do not claim to know the best way for you to organize your practice. Only you can figure that out. So I hope you'll experiment and try different things to see what works for you and what doesn't. I'd love to hear about your successes and those things that didn't work for you. I look forward to hearing you, and may your practice be beautiful and your strings be in tune. I'm Larget-Caplan. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephen Mattingly, guitar professor at the University of Louisville. Today I'm going to share with you one of my favorite practice strategies, that of segmentation and transference. When I work on this concept with students, I often use the phrase isolate and correct, replicate and perfect. This little phrase summarizes the process itself. For our purposes, segmentation will be the division of the whole into increasingly smaller component parts. This is used in learning theory for new skill acquisition, such as speaking and spelling words. There, the learner would sound out the component parts of a new word to develop a better phonological awareness of the word itself. In music, there can be a variety of contexts to use segmentation. That could be the expression or interpretation of a piece, the execution or the technical obstacles of a piece, or most likely a complementary blend of all of the above. To demonstrate its use, let's look at Carcassi's famous etude Opus 60 No. 3. We can musically segment a piece like this etude into the A and B sections, which further segment into phrases, subphrases, and motives, and these segments often follow expressive gestures within the music. Segmentation for technical reasons, on the other hand, may at times, but not necessarily, follow the inherent musical grouping of phrases, subphrases, and motives. In this context, we want to practice the smallest component part of a technical obstacle until we master its unique demands. Then we gradually contextualize the component part into increasingly larger segmentations. Let's look at situations where we might use technical and musical segmentations, which we then transfer. So, to begin with, let's look at probably the most infamously difficult passage within this etude, measures 22 and 23. In that short segment, I am not happy with the interruption and continuity between the line of fa, fi, sol, do. Specifically, the shift created at the 7th position move to the 1st position move that we have to make interrupts that continuity. I want to meet the technical obstacle there by segmenting that further. And I'll look at the exact moment when I have to shift from the 7th position to the 1st position and break that down further. So my practice at that moment would not be a reiteration necessarily of all of those measures again and again and again, when the only moment I need to work on is the F sharp at the 2nd string 7th fret to the D sharp 4th string 1st fret. To practice that, I'm going to break it into two parts. I'm first going to practice only the string crossing that occurs and play the F sharp on the 2nd string, 7th fret, And then I'll play the 4th string 7th fret to just practice the movement of moving from that bar to the single note. And then I can work in an exercise to increase that move. So now I have a shift with the string crossing, and so on and so forth until I get to the D sharp. I have to remember always to be musical with that expression, however, so then when I contextualize it back into the piece, I want the sound of that D sharp coming after the D natural to the E to be there. So D, D sharp, E to be a part of my expression. I can transfer that skill that I just developed into any other place within the piece where I have shifts like this. For example, the parallel spot in the A section would be between measures 5 and 6, when there I have the A sharp, and then the B. Musically speaking, I might practice the upper line of this piece, one of the prime reasons of the etude in the first place. So there I have at the first measure that La Sol appoggiatura over the A major chord. So I might isolate that little moment and then transfer my skill development on those 2 notes to every other appoggiatura that comes up between beats 2 and 3 of the following measures. I hope you can apply these skills to your own practice and that you'll find them very beneficial. Thanks for joining us today. I look forward to your questions.
Hi, my name is Ann Waller. I'm a senior lecturer at the Bienen School of Music at Northwestern University, and today I'm going to discuss musical elocution and common mispronunciations. I'm going to then try to suggest practice strategies that can help to better connect the inflection of musical vocabularies to the way we study both technique and repertoire. Music is a language. Just as effective speakers use inflection to better convey the meaning of text, guitarists can study the inflection of common musical vocabularies to more effectively express the meaning of sound. The famous 19th century elocutionist Robert Cumnock, who was a founder of the Cumnock School of Oratory, which eventually became the Northwestern School of Communication, expressed his thoughts about the training that he believed was necessary to train dramatic readers. He wrote, "A cultivated imagination which creates and reveals the scene as perfectly to the soul as the natural eye reveals it to the mind is the secret source of all eloquence or expressive speech." He also commented that an intelligent conception of the text must form the basis of all satisfactory interpretation. Common problems in speaking include misusing operative words or accenting wrong syllables, speaking in a monotone, speaking too quickly, or mumbling. To make that analogy to music, similar problems in guitar playing include false accents, a lack of dynamic and rhythmic inflection concerning pitch function, the lack of shaping dynamics on both the microdynamic and macrodynamic level, and the consideration of varied articulations. So what are solutions for developing better musical elocution? I think first, avoiding repetitive practice of long sections minus listening. Don't become a prisoner of your reflexes. We've all seen students that have trouble responding to interpretive coaching because their reflexes are so set in their coordination that it's hard to change. This kind of practicing kills spontaneity and tends to create run-on sentences. Instead, try using practice groupings to discover inflection and then build from words to phrases to sentences and then paragraphs. Motives that descend from ornamental figures, including appoggiaturas, mordents, turns, and cambiatas, imply specific dynamic shaping related to the interplay between non-harmonic and harmonic pitches. It's a common habit when playing the guitar to accent the last note of a grouping of pitches, particularly when playing fast tempos. Deciding articulations, such as where to play slurs and string crossings, also helps to better shape these motives. The first motive I'm going to look at is an appoggiatura, and in the context of Giuliani, it sounds like this. notice that Giuliani places the slurs to articulate the appoggiatura instead of hearing. So another example would be mordents. The most famous mordent probably is in the Prelude Fugue and Allegro by Bach. And you can add a slur to that or pluck it, but with the same inflection of the slur. The main point is that the first note carries the stronger dynamic, not the third note. You can find those same figures in pieces by composers like Villa-Lobos. And again, adding a slur helps, but if you don't want a slur, make sure that dynamically you inflect the first note and not the third note. Another category of sort of mispronunciations that's common is when we think about the implied dynamic shape of intervals, but then also the function of pitches in a scale or a tetrachord. So for instance, a falling third is a common mispronunciation. If you take an example like from Rodrigo, the first note of a third is always louder than the second note. It's not, it's, and also there's a dynamic shape to the motive, which has to do with the descending. You can find those in Bach. You find falling thirds everywhere. Another common example of mispronunciation comes from not listening to the pitch functions in scales, or in a smaller sense, tetrachords. So, for instance, in Capriccio Arabe, there's this famous scale, in Lagrima, it's very often you hear a kind of nonsense rubato of just something like that, but it's not hearing the tetrachord that tonicizes the scale. So you can actually, another interesting idea then is how can we consider the possibility of codifying these figures and motives into technical exercises which help the fingers better learn to respond. So for instance, you could practice mordent figures in the context of a scale and play something like this. And this one combines slurring and plucking when you're crossing the strings, so your goal is to make this string crossing rhyme with the slur. When it comes to descending thirds, you could make up something like this, where you play the same thing, either with slurs or without. That would be the inflection. You can also think about studying tetrachords instead of always playing long scales. So if you practice, for instance, the first tetrachord of a major scale, sounds very different than the minor tetrachord, because the half step is in a different place. You can study second tetrachords, which would be the major second tetrachord, or you could play minor second tetrachords, or go on and play Dorian, Mixolydian modes, things like that. So all of this together is just a way of trying to think through inflection through studying smaller groupings. And that's my idea for today.
Hello, I'm Doug Rubio. I'm professor of classical guitar at the State University of New York at Potsdam. One way to maximize your musical improvement is to get organized with your practice time. My favorite practice strategy for preparing a recital program involves making a list of playing goals. I begin by going through a process of what I think of as practice triage. Hospital emergency rooms assess the severity of each illness and injury that a patient brings in, and then assigns that patient an appropriate place in the line. Likewise, I identify and assess each practice goal, and then I put it on one of 3 lists, depending upon how much immediate attention it needs. List number 1 is all about skill development. On this list are difficult passages that need daily practice. Most are technical problems, moves in pieces that I can't do reliably yet. Examples might be a tricky left-hand shift, an awkward right-hand string crossing, or an unidiomatic chord shape. Each item needs to be short, and I'm talking about a few beats maximum. If the passage is longer than a few beats, odds are that there are several hard moves in it that would be better off being practiced separately. Because the items are short, I only need to practice each one for a very brief period of time, 2 or 3 minutes at most. I use a timer on my watch or phone to time myself. These short periods of time make it easier to stay very focused. I work my way down the items on this list, and when I get to the end, I start back at the beginning and work through the list a second time. Studies have conclusively shown that small amounts of practice done in several intervals is a better way of learning a skill than doing a single longer session. So I go through list number 1 at least twice and maybe a third time every day. Whatever practice time I have left in the day can be divided between lists 2 and 3. Now, an item on list 1 won't stay on that list forever. If I'm practicing effectively, it can eventually be graduated to list number 2. List number 2 is about skill maintenance. This list includes hard spots that I have mastered, but which still need fairly regular, but maybe not daily attention to keep them under my fingers. Like with list number 1, these passages are short and specific, and I practice each one for only a few minutes each. But this one, I only go through 1 time a day instead of 2 or 3. Since this is about maintaining skills rather than developing them, going through it multiple times is not as necessary. If I don't get to every item on list number 2 every day, that's okay. I keep track of the items I've practiced, and the next day I start from where I left off. Over the course of a week, I will have practiced each item on 3 or 4 different days. And as before, some items eventually graduate off of this list. But music is more than just a series of individual bite-sized morsels. So that brings me to list number 3, longer passages. These might be a few phrases long, or perhaps an entire section of a piece. And eventually, I will include entire works or movements. Because the items on this list are longer, I give each one considerably more practice time than the items on the first 2 lists. I practice each longer passage 2 or 3 days in a row before I move it to the bottom of the list. It may then be a few more days before I get to it again. And those are my 3 lists. The proportion of time that I spend on each list will vary over time. When I begin preparing a recital program, list number 1 is often quite long and requires a lot of practice time. But as I graduate items to list number 2, list number 1 doesn't take as much of my time. And when I'm just a few weeks out from my recital date, I certainly hope that list number 1 is close to being empty and that list number 2 will have only a moderate number of items on it. That way I can devote most of my time to the longer passages of list 3. So thank you for watching and good luck with your practicing.